Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Members Monday number 6, and we are in 2020. So welcome, and I'm so happy that we are doing Members Monday in 2020. You know, in last year I was thinking, can we even do a channel membership? Will anybody sign up for channel membership? And I think we're proving that it can be a success. I've got big plans for the members in 2020. We are just getting started. Seriously, we're just getting started. I'm going to be building up the content for the members in 2020. So not just Members Monday. We're going to have exclusive video series about topics I've never spoken about on the YouTube channel before. They're going to be super useful for you, help you push forward your Excel in 2020. So thank you for your continued support and looking forward to today's stream. So let's see who's with us in the chat. Jazz is with us in the chat. Welcome, Jazz. I can't remember whereabouts you are in the world, Jazz, so just remind me, and happy new year to you. And fantastic, Bob has just joined us, so welcome, Bob. Good to see you, because we are going to talk about Bob's file today. So Bob, let me know in the chat, can I share your file with everybody? Can I share your file with everybody? I'm going to have it on the screen, but I want to put a link to it so that other people can download it. Let me know in the Bob. Let me know, Bob, in the chat. No problems if you can't, but I figured it would add some value for the members if they too could download your file. That's what we're going to be talking about today, Bob's file, but specifically, we're going to be talking about setting up an Excel project, because that's exactly what Bob is trying to do at the moment. Set up a new project, think about the parameters of the project. What can we do? What can Excel do? So many people out there are trying to do this. Let me know in the chat what projects you're planning yourself. And it's an absolutely critical part of Excel practice that people almost always ignore. This is a very common problem that we have with Excel projects. People tend to have this kind of ad hoc approach. Do you know what I mean by an ad hoc approach to Excel? You know, when people, okay. Yes, Bob. Okay, Bob, thank you. I will, in a second, I will create a link and make the files available to everybody in the chat. But let me just finish this introduction. Yeah, so it's a common problem that people don't spend enough time on planning. People always open Excel, jump into the file. Let's start making some formulae. Let's start making some code. That, in my view, is a critical mistake. I get emails every day from people asking me to fix formulae, asking me to fix VBA. What always strikes me is if the overall structure of the file was simpler, the problems wouldn't be as difficult. So the main thing is the structure. If the file structure is simple, then formula building is fairly simple, navigation around the file is fairly simple, and coding is also fairly simple. So structure determines behavior is a phrase in management science, but structure determines how difficult it is to work with the file. If you're good at structuring Excel files, you don't need complex formulae. You don't need complex code if you're good at structuring files. So why don't people spend more time planning to make sure they have the right file structure? If you can plan, this is going to make a big difference to your Excel practice. Let me get into the chat, just see what people are saying. Yeah, so Bob, I'm going to use the one that you sent, but I've changed the names. Okay. I read through the briefing. Jasfin says, don't have the XLX. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So just give me a couple of seconds, guys. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Get it on my other, I have two laptops here when I'm doing the live stream. I'm just going to go to Dropbox, and I've got Bob's file in the Dropbox. And then we're going to get the link. Yep, link created. Copy link. Okay, and then I'm going to drop that into the chat. Okay, so that's a link to Bob's file that's in the chat now. It should appear in your chat in a few seconds. And I'm just going to go through and check it's the right version here. So check that we don't have any names in here. And yeah, this is the version with the changed name. So this should be the fully anonymized version. So let me know in the chat. are you able to download the file? Okay, Bart's here. Hello, Bart. Really good to see you, and Happy New Year to you too. So this is what we're focusing on. This is something I've never covered on the YouTube channel, because to be honest, with YouTube, you've got to play a game. You've got to play the YouTube game. You've got to put topics on YouTube that people are going to click on. So the boring stuff that is actually really useful, like this stream we're doing today, people don't click on it. So I'm quite reluctant to create content about this kind of thing because it's not very successful on YouTube. And that means YouTube is kind of encouraging this kind of short-term attitude to learning, quick value, quick value, quick value. That isn't great. And anyway, that's a conversation about YouTube. But the point is, this is something I haven't covered on the channel yet. So I've come up today with my new project checklist. And it's interesting for us because we're going to apply this to Bob's file, and you've got links in the chat. You can download the briefing from Bob, and you can download Bob's file now. Good, so we can really work on this kind of collaboratively. Okay, the first thing we're going to think about is the purpose of the application. And believe it or not, people don't always think about what the purpose of the application is. And I'm going to go to the Bob's briefing now. In the briefing from Bob, Bob, I'm going to have to make some critical comments about what you've done. It's not personal, and I know you're going to take it in the right way. But the first thing I'm really looking for is what's the purpose of the application? And I want to know how the application connects to the rest of the business. As this is the only way the file is actually going to be successful. Does it deliver value for the business? For example, and in a recent live stream on the channel, I spoke about 5 projects I did in recent years and spoke about the purpose of each project. So I was speaking about a project today, which is for a commodities company. And the purpose of the file is to help the salespeople make better quotes to customers. Yeah. So when we talk about purpose, always try to connect the file to the context, to the business, to the industry, to the environment. And I'm working on another file at the moment, which is in football data. I also spoke about this example in the recent live stream. And the purpose of this file is to generate odds, so that the people using this file can find favorable bets, favorable investments. So this is where we start. It's important to get the purpose right, because then we understand the context, and we're focused from the beginning on the context rather than being focused on the techniques. I see so many people out there, Excel geeks. I'm definitely an Excel geek myself, but they're just trying to apply the techniques, apply the new formulae, apply VBA. Well, you can do great work with very few techniques, with a very small subset of techniques, which is pretty much what I do, but I'm very focused on context. It's all about the application. So we can start in the right way by thinking about the purpose of the application. And you can go back to our public live stream. Let me just see if I can find it here. Here we go. You can go back to our public live stream, but here I talk about some of the different files, and I've tried to describe the purpose of the file here. So give it context and explain how the file is going to deliver value in the context of the business. Justin says he can't hear anybody. Can you hear the sound, guys? Yeah, can you hear the audio? Yeah, you're going to have to hit reload. YouTube seems to be slow, maybe the internet connection is slow. I'm not absolutely sure, but the stream health seems to be good at my end. So yeah, we've got to be explicit about the purpose of the application first. Then we're talking about the type of application. Now, I talk about 2 main types of Excel models, and I'm going to ask you, Bob, 2 types of Excel applications. What kind of application is it that you're doing here? 2 main types. We talk about modeling, and we talk about data analysis. And there's some rarer types as well. And there's combinations of these 2. But these are the 2 key concepts when you're thinking about type of application. So what do they mean? Well, an Excel model is input process, and output. For example, the commodities model that I'm building, we're looking to get to a price for a commodity. And there's three main things that are inputted for us to get to this price. And we're using formulae, creating a calculation chain to get us from input to output. So modeling consists of input, process, and output. This is kind of the classic application of Excel, where you're kind of looking for an answer, where you're using formulae, where you have a calculation chain. This is modeling. So Bob, are you building a model? I actually don't think you are, Bob. You're actually looking to do some data analysis. So many people out there trying to do this in Excel. But if we're doing data analysis, then the calculation chain is less important because we have a data set. We can see on Bob's file. I'm going to go to Bob's file quickly, put myself on the right-hand side of the screen. We've got the data sheet in Bob's file. So this happens to me all the time. People send me files and I'm working through my checklist. Yeah, and one of the things I'm asking is, what application of Excel is this? Is it a model with input, process, output, or is the client looking to do some data analysis? Now, the primary function of Bob's file is to do some data analysis. Data analysis means a different set of techniques. If we're doing data analysis, we're thinking about things like, well, let me know in the chat. What are you using? And Bob says, yes, also analysis with the reports. Report generation is a type of analysis. So there we're thinking about things like pivot tables. We're thinking about my number one thing people don't use in Excel, which is data analysis formulae. Things like SUMIFs, COUNTIFs, DSUM. DSUM is my secret weapon. Get so much done with DSUM. We're thinking about maybe using VBA to create some custom reports. We're thinking less about creating calculation chains between formulae because that's to do with modeling. Okay, and Bob has also hit on the third function. So I talk about two main applications. Sorry, it's not the right slide there. There we go. I talk about two main applications, so modeling and data analysis. Data input. Data input is a third kind of less important application that you can have in mind. Lots of people out there are just using Excel to input data and to store data. I did a project last year, well, a year ago, but we updated it last year for a recycling company here in the UK. This recycling company recycles glass. So, you know, when you go to the supermarket, you put your glass in a big kind of tank, a recycling container. This company gets those containers and then they take samples of the glass, and they want to input those samples, record those samples over time. So this is another type of application, less important than modeling and data analysis, data input. So there we can use Excel to do the data input. User forms can be useful for data input, but what people don't do, and I think people should be doing more, is just using the spreadsheet as a data input mechanism. If we use the spreadsheet, we can use things like data validation, cell validation to help us get things done. So these are the main types of applications. So when we think about a new project, or we get something from an internal customer, an external customer that they want us to look at, what's the type of application? There's three things for us to think about. And also bear in mind, you might have a combination of these things. So we've got 4 people here. So do say hello in the chat. I'm keen to know who else has joined, because I had a few members join over Christmas. So new member, make sure you say hello to us in the chat. And Bob, let me know if this is kind of making sense and helping you. Okay, so we thought about the purpose of the application, the type of application. Now we want to think about the structure of the application. This is really key. And because this is where people make the critical mistake. If the structure is clear, the formulae are easy, the report generation is easy, and everything just gets easier. So structure is so important. So what are we thinking about here? Well, we're thinking about the number of sheets. I'll go to the desktop view so you can see the whole file. We're thinking about the number of sheets, and we're thinking about the role of each sheet. And so many times I've received Excel files from organizations. I've received Excel files from organizations that have just got out of control. And this is maybe a bit of a problem with Excel, or it's more of a problem with organizations. I don't know. That people take a file, then they add to the file, add to the file, add to the file, and you just have so many sheets in the file. I dealt with a file on this commodities project. Their file had 110 sheets. 110 sheets in the file. If your file has 110 sheets, you have a structural problem. I'll say if your file has more than 10 sheets, you have a structural problem. You've got to be very clear about what the role of each sheet is and how those sheets are going to interact. So I was fairly encouraged when Bob sent me his file, because there's a reasonable number of sheets. One thing we must always do is right click on the sheet and check, do we have any hidden sheets in the file? You can also go to another way to do that is to go to the VBA editor. I'll just open this up quickly. Opened up on the wrong screen there. Go to the VBA editor here. Let's bring it onto your view. And then in the VBA editor, you can see the screens, you can see the sheets in the file. If the visible property of the sheet is set to Excel very hidden, which you can do in VBA, you can set the visible property to Excel very hidden, then the sheet name won't appear here. So to be absolutely sure how many sheets are in the file, you can go to the developer tab and open the VBA editor. So we're looking for a reasonable number of sheets, and in Bob's file, yeah, we have a reasonable number of sheets. We've got 7 sheets here. We've got the main screen. We've got 2 sheets to do data input. We've got a report sheet here. We've got our data sheet. Then we've got drop downs, and we've got a blank sheet here. So let me know in the chat, what do we think to this overall file structure? It's reasonable enough. We can work with this. We haven't got 100 sheets or 20 sheets even. We've got a reasonable number of sheets. Can you see opportunities for streamlining this file structure? I can certainly see opportunities for doing that. But let me first show you how I would design this with a client, how I go about in the design phase, explaining the structure of a spreadsheet file to a client. You know, I always do this with customers. The worst thing you can do when you start an Excel project is, what's the worst thing you can do when you start an Excel project? Open up Excel. This is the worst thing you can do. Now, one thing I'll, always do with a customer is go into Excel and do some kind of visual for the customer using this shape here. And I find that this shape just kind of looks a bit like a spreadsheet file. And then I'll use these shapes to explain the structure of the file. And maybe next week, if we do a similar topic again, I'll show you some examples from my work. So in Bob's file, I'm going to go ahead and insert text here as well. Illustration shapes. Can I just have a little text box here? How do we get a little text box then, guys? I've got text over here on the right, just outside of your screen. Text box. Okay, we've got a little text box here. Going to say data sheet. Okay. Data here. So something like this, right? This text box, I'd just like to get rid of the fill here. So shape format and then shape fill and no fill. Okay. And then I always change the default fonts. I think that always gives the customer a feeling that they're getting some value. I usually go for Arial. Straight in that, straight like this. So something like this would be the kind of thing I'll do for a customer. Let's just change this color to something a bit lighter so we can see this a little bit better. Something like this is good. So I build up a diagram. So this is a visual, and I find customers love this. Customers love talking about spreadsheets when Excel isn't open. This is why these visual tools are so helpful for us. So we have a data sheet. We need to input data here, and then you can talk about the features of the sheet. So cell validation to support data input. You can put other useful information on there as well. Something like that. So we've got an outline here. Let's get rid of this outline. Okay, shape formats, and then shape outline, no outline. Okay, so this is what we might start with. And then we're thinking, okay, can I group these shapes? Let's go, okay, shape formats. Okay, outside of your screenshot, group, and then group the shapes. There we go. And then Control C here. In fact, just hold down the Control key. Okay, and then we can have another sheet here. So this might be the report sheet. Okay, and then we can say sheet to present reports. There we go. You can probably see how much I enjoy this. You know, I love the visual stuff, and it means we're using the right medium to do design. When we're in an Excel spreadsheet, you know, we're clicking through tabs, you know, adding tabs, deleting tabs. That's not the best way to do a design job. The best way to do a design job, I keep going back to this visual for some reason. The best way to do the design job is to use a medium that helps you do the design. And by using this visual medium, by using this shape, so we're going to integrate some arrows in a second as well, we can have much better discussions about overall file structure. If the structure is clear, the rest of it should be easy. And I'll build this up a little bit more for you. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much for the clarification, Bob. Bob says, just to clarify, the first 4 sheets are examples of what I wanted and not necessarily real and active sheets. Yeah, so we'll talk about opportunities for reducing the number of sheets in a second. Thank you for that, Bob. Jasvin, yes, very good. Maybe a different color for the areas where the user is doing the data input. Yeah, we'll talk about the individual sheet layout a bit later in the stream. Bart says, if there are a lot of sheets, maybe combine a formula structure and VBA. Yes, as I said, we'll talk about opportunities for reducing the number of sheets in a second. Sounds like what I was aiming for, the main sheet, that when you click on something on the left, one of the examples appears, not necessarily keeping those tabs. Yes, very good. Very good, Bob. So, you know, we can see, for example, here, I'm on the enter posting card sheet here and the enter receipts sheet. You know, we can see there's quite a similar layout in these 2 sheets. So there might be scope here for using some VBA so that when somebody clicks on the sheet, the format is changed, or rather the entries in the cells are changed, depending on the input that the user wants. We've got to remember at the same time, any approach has pros and cons, and VBA is not a panacea. This is one of my favorite quotes. VBA is not a panacea, is what I'd like to say. VBA doesn't fix everything, and we shouldn't use VBA just because we want to use VBA. So my proposed solution, that we use VBA to reformat the layout of the sheets when the user clicks on the sheet tab. Remember, we can trigger a macro when the user clicks on the sheet tab. That's possible, but it has cons as well, doesn't it? Because then we have to do some coding. That's more code for us to maintain. The user might not be accustomed to having some code run when they click on a tab. That might slow things down. So there's pros and cons to everything. But yeah, the fact that these sheets just appear very similar in terms of their layout, maybe there's an opportunity for reducing the number of sheets there. But anyway, we'll talk more about the sheet layout later in the stream, but we're still talking about structural issues here. So I highly recommend this kind of structural diagram. As I said, when you present this to somebody who's a non-technical person, and you know, I still don't consider myself to be a technical person, believe it or not, then you'll find you should get a good reaction here. So we've got the different sheets here, but a crucial element of these diagrams that people often miss out is to show what's the interaction between the sheets. What's the interaction between the sheets? And I do that using an arrow. Let's have a black arrow here. And how do we shape outline black, please? There we go. Just going to format the arrow head, right click, format shape, and then over on the right hand side of the screen, so outside of your screenshot, I can now change the arrow head. I want a bigger arrow head size. There we go. So we can now see the arrow head there. I want to know, how are these sheets connected? We're talking about getting some information from the data sheet to the report sheet. That means there's some kind of connection between these sheets. So what are the options for connections? Well, the most obvious one is having a formulae working across sheets. If that's the case, then we'd want to write here. I'm going to go ahead and do it now. Control, just to copy this text box out. In fact, let's have a new text box. Shape format. I'm just going to briefly ungroup these elements here. There we go. This should allow me to copy out just the text box. Okay, holding down the control key there. Nice. And then we could say connected via formulae. Connected via formulae. And for example, if we were using dsum to generate our reports, and that's an approach I've applied many times, using dsum to extract some data from a database and create a report, then these two sheets would be connected via formulae. And we could even go as far as saying what those formulae are. One thing I'm going to do to clean up the interface here is go to view and switch off the grid lines. Okay. Is this what we're suggesting here? Bob, what do you think? What do you think is the best way to populate our daily report here? What's the best way to do it? I mean, we could do this using, it's possible to do this using some formulae, maybe using some lookup formulae and using some of our database formulae. We have a series on the channel called Excel Data Analysis Formulae for Beginners, 7 videos where we cover all of these formulae. Just looking at the structure, I'm thinking it's going to be better to do this using VBA. So I'll go ahead and say connected via, we could say VBA routine. Or your client is going to just prefer you to say button, okay? Because, you know, it doesn't matter to our customers whether we're using VBA or not. We shouldn't expect our customers to be impressed by using VBA. Control I for italics here. So you could just say connected via button. So you're saying to your customer, you know, you have a button on the data sheet that allows you to click and that generates your report. So this is the kind of thing we can do to really work on our structure. Bob's saying, I'm used to doing this in Access. Excel is where I stumble outside of filtered data. I mean, that's a great point. And it's a point I didn't cover really in our initial discussion. The purpose of the application, the type of the application. One thing we would discuss at this point is Excel the best platform for doing this? Is there a better platform for doing this? And as I said, I have lots of people phoning me up, asking me questions about Excel. I want to do an Excel project, but sometimes Excel is not the best platform to do it. And for me, there's 2 reasons why Excel is not the best platform to do it. And you might know them already if you watch lots of my videos. If you have a lot of data, and for me, that means over 500,000 rows. If you have a lot of data, then Excel might start to struggle. But to be honest, even with 500,000 rows, if the spreadsheet is set up efficiently, the formulae is set up efficiently, the code is efficient, then Excel should be fine. The other thing is, if you have lots of remote working, so you have lots of people wanting to work on the file at the same time, that means usually, unless you've got a very good file sharing system and they're not sophisticated enough yet, Excel, you're going to struggle with Excel. You're going to need some kind of web-based application for doing that. So this is another thing. Should we be using Excel at all? And, you know, I'd like to think that my customers can count on my honesty. And if they shouldn't be using Excel, I'm very happy to tell them, because if you're trying to do a project in Excel that isn't suited to Excel, that's going to make your life a nightmare as a developer, as well as not delivering something suboptimal for the client. Jasmine says I would make the inputs one by one or order style. Yes. Jasmine says for the end user, then map the report to those inputs. Absolutely, Jazz. We were going to get onto that. So with our structural diagram, perhaps we'll continue to develop this. But let's get on to some layout issues. So when we're talking about how the file should be designed, we talk about structure, number of sheets, and the role of each sheet. Then we want to think about the layout of each sheet as well. And again, this is something I don't do in Excel. A customer came to me a couple of years ago and said, I'd like to see your proposed design for a dashboard. And I was like, great. And I did it in PowerPoint, like using shapes like this. You could do it in Excel. I did it in PowerPoint using shapes like this. So again, get the medium right. It's much easier to move shapes around on a page in PowerPoint or even in Excel than it is to actually be merging cells and adjusting column widths in Excel. So make sure you're using the right medium to do the planning. Yeah, so let's talk about some layout issues I can see here. So I think, Bob, you've designed this for a large screen. I'm on a 13-inch screen and a 15-inch screen here. And yeah, you can see I'm having to do a lot of scrolling. So again, this is something for us to, bear in mind in the design phase. It's best to do the design for a kind of standard screen and standard screen resolution and, 13, 15-inch screen, whatever it might be. Often you don't know that until the client loads up the file on their system. So that's what we should be doing through the project, getting the file to the customer before it's finished, getting the file to the customer at a very early stage and saying, test it on your system, so we can get feedback and flag up this kind of issue very early. Okay, Bob says the problem is we no longer support access. Bob, I didn't say, but for your project, you said you got 100,000 entries. This should be very comfortable in Excel. Yeah, with the right formulae, the right coding, the right structure, this is very comfortable in Excel. Okay, Bob said, sorry, I have a 29-inch. Then we have a 19-inch at work. Yeah, don't worry, Bob. This is a common problem I see. And then you got a screen here, which is called main screen. So you're talking about having a screen here just for navigation. It's almost like a welcome screen. Okay. And I do know what you said. I know what you said about, you're just trying to give an example here. So I hope I'm not being too critical, Bob. I'm trying to help, but I discourage welcome screens and main screens because they just tend to irritate after a while. Just like I discourage a welcome message. You can put code in the VBA editor to flash up a welcome message when somebody opens the file. That also gets annoying after a while. It just feels a little bit unnecessary. So I wouldn't recommend having a main screen. I would recommend integrating the navigation into all the sheets. Integrate the navigation into all the sheets so that whatever sheet you're on, you've got navigation options at the top here. But looking at the number of options you have, I would consider using a user form here. Using a user form maybe. So you have a button at the top saying Navi, flash up a user form. That's going to allow you to select some of these entries here. Okay. But what I'm seeing is you've got three main functions here. And these are probably the three sheets that we want. So entry, you can do your entry there. We've already discussed maybe one sheet, maybe two sheets. Then you need a sheet to do the reports. And then this searches. So by searches, Bob, do you mean reports for kind of these criteria? So for example, get a report by a client's last name. That also sounds like reporting. So we're talking about two main functions here, data entry and reporting. Then we're going to need a database as well. Okay. Yeah. So I don't encourage having a welcome screen. Then I'd also say, where's the prime real estate? I think the most valuable real estate in the world is in Hong Kong, I believe. That's prime real estate. Where's the prime real estate in a spreadsheet file? It is in cell A1. If your customer is a Western customer, so if they're an English-speaking customer, it might not be in the case in Asia, and even in parts of the Middle East, I've done spreadsheets for people who start on the right-hand side and go left. But in the Western context, people are going to start in the top left corner. So you can see where I've put the cell there. They're going to start in the top left, and they're going to work down to the bottom right. Okay. So we don't want any spaces in the top left. So this space, we want to be doing something with that space. That's something for us to bear in mind in terms of general layout. The prime real estate is in the top left corner. And then I do note you've got quite a few merged cells. Now, merged cells cause problems in VBA, and Jazz has already said in the chat that we could set up these inputs a little better as well. I know you've got some merged cells here on the inputs too. These merged cells cause problems when we're trying to use VBA, and it does look like we're going to need some VBA at some point in your file. So we'd look to avoid those merged cells as well. Okay, let's have a quick look through the other sheets. So we're saying, yep, these two sheets have a similar layout. So we've got a discussion there, how to manage that. Daily reports, okay. Okay, I would look at, I like the way, Bob, you've implemented a color scheme through the file. So you've thought about the formatting. I really like this blue formatting effect at the top. Very nice. I think the people using the file are going to love that. So you've got a color scheme going through the file. I'd want to use color to support user understanding even more than you've already done, because I see you've got yellow highlighting here to highlight the to highlight the sheet that you're on. You've also used formatting very nicely here to highlight the input cells. So I really like that. That's really nice. Let's think about using different colors for the reports as opposed to the inputs, as opposed to the input file set, as opposed to the input sheet. So here we've got input sheets. We could have one dominant color on the input sheets and then a different dominant color on, still within the same color scheme, a different dominant color on the report sheets to give the user the idea that they're now on a sheet that has a different function, using that color to support user understanding as you've done elsewhere in the file. Then we've got our data sheet. So does the formatting of the data sheet matter? Is the user going to be able to access and kind of browse through the data themselves? If so, we've got to think about the formatting. Then you've got the drop downs here, that's fine. And then we've got a blank sheet that we just used to create a little structural diagram here. Good. So these are the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm getting an Excel project started. Let's go back to the chat quickly. Okay, enter all in column A and have G, M, and R columns pull down from column A. Okay, what are you talking about there, Jasfin? It looks interesting. Let's go back up the chat here. I would make the inputs one by one or order style. Yeah. Yeah, the inputs, yeah, I think because of you've been using the widescreen, it's necessary for me to do some scrolling, Well, the basic point is we want the user to be able to use the application without scrolling. That's the challenge. Use the application without scrolling. Vertical scrolling is not great. Horizontal scrolling has been shown to create really bad cognitive load for the user. So we want to get to a setup where we don't have any, where the user doesn't need to do too much scrolling. I think that might be what you're getting at, Jasfen. All in one tab, or all in one tab. Yeah, we've spoken about that. Columns A, B are for the developer. Okay. So what would the developer do with these columns, Bob? Have you got any values in here? Jasmine says, yes, that's right. Thank you. This is all for appearance and example, so it's all good for redoing. Good. I was thinking everything be input in one area. Yes, Jasmine, yeah, I see what you're saying there. Then the forms under the receipts and the rest of the files do a VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP of index to pull those inputs. Yes. Forms under the receipts. Okay. Okay, so I think you're saying some of these inputs we could do with by looking up a value in the database. No values yet, maybe for setting anchor locations. Good. Make something, Bart says, make something in VBA that you can only select what the user needs. Yeah. I mean, these are all possible. I'm going to go ahead and take one of these sheets and give it, just give it a reformat. Okay. To give us a sense of where we're going. But let me quickly go back to our checklist so I don't get completely lost. Yeah, we're touching on a few of these issues as we go through. We're thinking about user needs. Now we're going to reformat a sheet. We're thinking about excessive scrolling, so we are thinking about user needs. My assumption with user needs, so I'm on point 4 now. My assumption with user needs is the file is always going to be used by a standard user, never an advanced user, just a basic user. The file has to be that easy to use. If you need to do any kind of advanced stuff, if you need to access the VBA editor, if you need to edit formulae, even if you need to change sheets a lot, if you need to navigate around a sheet by going up and down and left and right and scrolling, that's probably too much for the average user to do, believe it or not. We've got to have very low expectations of what the user can do. And we'll talk about some data issues as well. But this input sheet, yeah, so I'm arguing we don't need this navigation. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, Alt-HD-C, and then F4 key, repeat the last action. So I don't think we need, okay. We can see a problem with emerging now. I'm going to unmerge this, Alt-HMU to unmerge. Just going to delete this cache receipts for a second there. Alt-HD-C, delete the columns. Okay, I'm going to unmerge these, Alt-HMU, unmerge, F4 key, repeat last action, and then F4 key again to repeat last action. So they're all unmerged. Now I'd be tempted, Alt-HDR, delete the row, F4, repeat the last action. I'll be tempted to do it like this, Bob. So these are all unmerged now. So Control X, Control V here, and then Control X and Control V. So Bob, let me know, and this is in relation to Jasfin's points, are these all user inputs here? Are these all user inputs, or can some of these be kind of looked up? Okay, is there any merging here? Alt-HMU, no merging there. Let's go Control X, Control V. It's worked quite well. Okay, Control C here, Control Alt VT, Control Alt VT for formats. Good. So already I'm feeling a little bit more relaxed now. Now things feel a little bit more under control. Control Alt VT. Okay, so you can see how quickly I was able to reformat that page by using keyboard shortcuts. So highly recommend you get into keyboard shortcuts. I tried to say the shortcuts as I was using them there, and they're just so helpful. Yeah, one thing to think about here, where should we put buttons to do things? Bob says yes, they are tabbed entries in Access. Okay, so Bob, are we saying some of these are inputs and some of these values are going to be brought through from the database? For the inputs, which ones are text inputs and which ones are drop-down menus, and then which ones are values pulled through from the database? Okay, so they're the three questions, Bob, and we'd want to change the formatting according to whether it's a text input, a drop-down menu, or a value pull through from database. And one more is an input with another form of validation. Okay, so a drop-down menu is, what's a drop-down menu? It's a form of data validation. Are you going to have any other inputs with other forms of data validation? For example, a maximum value, we can set that up in cell validation. So that's another form of data validation for us to think about. I'm just going to go over here, just clean this up. Let's go Alt-HEA here, just to clear the formats, Alt-HEA. Good, yeah, but we were talking about buttons here. Yeah, Gerhard, welcome. I think you've been watching, because I can see we had 6 or 7 people watching at one point. Gerhard says, put the buttons at the top. I love it. Yeah, put the buttons at the top. We don't want users to have to scroll down in order to get something done. So let's have, and I would have my usual setup. Let's change the Alt-HOH15 here. Okay, where are we going to put these buttons then? Probably at the top. I'm going to insert some rows here. Okay, and Control C, Control Alt V and T. Let me know in the chat, have you been able to work along with me? Are you doing this formatting as well? We've got some cool formatting here. Got this cool shaded effect is being repeated here. I'm going to try to get rid of that just for the time being. I do like the shaded effect, Bob. I do like it. Just want to keep it nice and clean and simple for the time being. Okay. Yeah, Bart's absolutely right. So on the top from left to right, remember if you're working in the West, and this has been a problem with me, I've worked with people in the Middle East before, the user starts in the top and goes down and then to the right for you. So how do we insert a button? Let's go developer, then insert button here. Then I'm going to hold down the Alt key. Hold down the Alt key. That allows me to insert a button. We don't want a macro at the moment. Edit text. Let's say print receipt here. Okay, and again, I always think the client feels they're getting more value if you change the default text. I usually go for Arial. Okay, and then a quick way to create more buttons. Control S, save the file. Quick way to create more buttons is hold down the Control key and then using the Alt key to position these buttons. And you'll note, because I've previously used the Alt key, these buttons are nicely aligned here. So we've got print receipt, enter new receipt. Okay, and then you've got exit there. Okay. Okay, I don't think we need an exit button, Bob. I'm just going to get rid of the exit button. I'm going to clear these columns actually, Alt HEA to clear the formatting. Okay, and let me show you the full screen view here. So can you see how this has changed? It's much smaller now, more concise, easier to manage. It's easier for the developer to manage, as well as the user to interact with. I don't think we need this button because this was the exit button. I don't think we need an exit button. And then we can now get rid of these two. So Alt HEA here. In fact, let's just do Alt HEA. Let's do that. Control C, Control Alt VT here. Okay. This is our starting, like quite a nice starting point. Again, let's change the default inputs here. Let's change these to Arial. There we go. In the text size, Alt HFS. Let's change this to 10. There we go. And then something like that. Okay, Bob says, I like it. Very good. I mean, simplicity is key. And, you know, as I said, I'm not just talking about the user here. Simplicity is key for the programmer too. Then let's go ahead. We've currently got these inputs here. These input cells are currently stretching over 3 columns here. So let's take this down to a single column. So again, Alt HEA. And then Alt HBA gives us all borders. Then F4 to repeat the last action. I'm using the shift key and the arrows to navigate and to select the cells. F4 repeat last action. Take the formatting here, Control C, hold down the shift key, arrows. Don't do that. Hold down the shift key, not the control key, and Control Alt VT. Okay, and then we need a suitable column width here, Alt HOW 20. Might be good. Let's try 30. There we go. Okay, then maybe just slightly more row height here. Let's go to 20. That's too much. I am definitely working on detail matters now that probably don't matter. Let's go to 15 and F4 to make sure these are the same height. And then these rows, I'd call them spacer rows. Spacer rows, because they space out the data for us. So let's give them a different height. 10 is usually a good height for a space row, again using the F4 key to repeat the action there. Okay, good. So, this to me looks like a reasonable Excel interface. So what else are we thinking about now? Well, I can reposition this button now. Enter new. Okay. Are we going to need an enter new button? Not sure if we're going to need one, an enter new button. We'll just pop that there for now. Okay, I will put 2 new columns in here. Okay, so why do I have these extra columns here? I have the extra columns because if you want to do some a custom navigation system later, you see, how this might work is you'd have a custom navigation system across the top here. Okay, so how would that work? I'll just briefly try to illustrate this. We've got a video called Excel VBA, create a custom navigation system in Excel VBA. You can have another row here, and you can watch that video to find out how to create a custom navigation system. I'm going to put a shape in here, so insert illustrations, shapes. Okay, then we can go for something like, I've done this with many different shapes. Let's just use this shape, which we used earlier actually for the design, or a similar shape. I'm going to go ahead and using the Alt key, make sure that this shape is the same size as this column. That's going to allow for consistency later. Okay, and click the shape, Control, so we have another one here. Now something like this can work well. Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating it, but you'll have something like this. Something like this, and then you're going to click on these shapes. There we go. I'm just using the arrow key to make those small shape movements, by the way. Okay, Bob's saying enter new would be for the next receipt that needed to be entered. Okay, so I think the way to do it is to have the user do the entry and to then have a button that says okay, something like enter to database, let's just say enter to data. Okay, now there could be an argument for putting this button at the bottom because we want the customer to click the button after the data entry is done. Okay, so possibly you could argue you should put this button at the bottom. That's the logical thing to do. But you don't need a button to kind of initiate the data entry process because we're using a spreadsheet here. We're using a spreadsheet to do the data entry. The data entry mechanism is ready for us there. If we wanted to use a user form to do the data entry, which would be possible, gives us some more control maybe, but also a lot more coding, a lot more work, then we could have a button saying make new entry, and that would flash up the user form. Okay, but because we're using the spreadsheet, we just want the user to populate all of these rows, and then click the button to enter the data to the database. This is the approach we should be looking at. There's various mechanisms we can use to ensure that the user fills out all of the fields, fills out all of the cells. We can use validation, conditional formatting to do that. We can use VBA so that when the user clicks off the sheet, we could have a message box flashing up saying, have you completed data entry? Do you want to continue with data entry? You're going to lose this data entry. So there's various ways for us to make sure that the customer doesn't lose data halfway through. There's ways for us to do that. Okay. Anyway, I think this is, Justin says maybe a next button. That's also possible. Okay, good. So this is how I would set up a sheet for data inputs. Okay, so the main discussion, I don't want to lose the main discussion. We've done some kind of operational stuff there, but I don't want to lose the main discussion. The main discussion is about the structure of the application, which really is the most important thing in Excel projects, getting that application structure right. Also, I'm conscious we're coming to the end of the stream time now, so make sure you ask me any questions in that. But the structure of the application is all important, and the way to do the structure is to use a medium, other than the spreadsheet itself to create a plan. And I've done that using shapes. These shapes are very easy to manipulate. We can put new shapes in. We can discuss these shapes easier than just looking at a spreadsheet file. And then what else we've got to think about with structure? We've also got to think about layouts, the layout of individual sheets. Now, hopefully from what you've seen today, you can see the kind of process I go through when I'm thinking about sheet layouts. And often I'm doing exactly what I'm doing today. I'm redesigning something that a client has sent to me. But we've covered most of the key issues that I would think about when I'm thinking about sheet layout. And we've managed to go from something like this, which is a good effort, Bob. I don't want to be too critical, but it does have some weaknesses that we've touched on, to something a bit more like this, with possibly some nice navigation up at the top here. Okay, let me know any further questions in the chat. But I can go back and do a quick summary. Have we covered everything on here? Yep. Who are the users? We've spoken about user needs, and we've spoken about, we always assume that the user is, a basic user. Let's talk briefly about data issues. So I'd want to look at the data and just get a feel for the quality of the data. Get a feel for the quality of the data. If I was starting a new project for a customer and they said, this is the data, I definitely want to check the quality of the data. So what kind of thing are we talking about? Well, this kind of thing here, where we have Hernandez without a space and then Hernandez with a space after it. This is a data issue, because when we do some kind of analysis, Excel won't necessarily understand these as the same name, because one name has a space after it. And then this kind of thing, where we've got a first name entered after a surname. This kind of thing is also problematic. So I'd want to do some quick checks to get a sense of the quality of the data. One quick way to do that is to filter the data and then go through and does it look sensible? And I can now see that where it says Smith Henry here, that's a clear sign that there's some data issues here. And in future streams we can cover, I have a particular VBA routine that I use to establish the quality of the data. It goes through a data set and then separates out all of the entries into a list. I can then sort that alphabetically and I can see what the quality of the data is, get a feel for the quality of the data. So this is something else we've got to think about when we're starting a new project. Data quality. How do we ensure good data quality? Well, that begins right here. It begins with good data input, particularly data validation. Where we want to limit inputs, we want to make sure we're doing that using data validation, using drop-down menus. So data quality, prevention is better than cure. We can stop data quality issues if we're proactive from the beginning. That means having a good data input mechanism with data validation, cell validation, also with some VBA-based checks as well. So this is the kind of thing we're looking at. Good. Bart says, I understand, no questions at the moment. Very good. So I hope that's helpful for you. So we talked about the new project checklist. These are the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm starting a project. But the real message is we're going to save so much stress later on by answering these questions now. What's the purpose of the application? Is the application doing what the client wants it to do? What type of application is it? Is it data analysis? Is it modeling? Is it data input? Is it a combination of those? What should the structure of the application be? Who are the users, and are there any data issues? By going through this checklist, you're going to de-stress your projects. I guarantee you're going to de-stress your projects. You're going to find you're getting so much more value out of VBA because the structure of the file is easier to work with. So that's as far as we'll go today, guys, but I see this as another project. So maybe next week we can continue with this project. And I know, Bart, you've got your project too that we're pushing forward with. Let me know, Bart. Send me an email to let me know what that project's looking like. But what do you want to do next week, guys? What do you want to do next week in Members Monday? I'm happy to do more on this project. I think this is a great example that Bob sent in. We can go back to Bart's project, or do you want to do something new? So Kamran is not with us today. We've had 2 or 3 new members sign up, so you can get in touch with me. Or Jasfin, have you got a particular project that you want me to look at? Do you want to do something different altogether? Let me know, because I want to create value for as many members as possible out there. Okay, thank you so much for being with us, guys. As I said, we're just going to build this up as best we can. I'm going to be here for you every Monday, creating as much value as I can. We're going to just build this community. And who knows, in 2 or 3 years' time, we might have hundreds, thousands of members. But I won't forget you guys. People like Bart, people like Bob, people like Jazz. I will not forget that you guys were first in. And I hope I'm creating some value for you in your Excel practice. Let me know what you want to cover next week. Take care, guys. I'll